As you make your way back to your seats, if you'll find Esther chapter 4, you can remain standing. We're in Esther chapter 4. If you'll stand or remain standing, just to honor the reading of God's word. We're going to be in Esther chapter 4 as we read this morning. I want to read verses 12 through 16. I'm going to get us all in context eventually. These are the verses we're going to spend the most of our time on here this morning. Esther chapter 4, beginning in verse 12. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come into the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. God, we are thankful for your word, thankful for the gift that it is that you've given us your word through your spirit. So now, God, we need him. We need your spirit to teach us, to come alongside of us, to open our hearts and minds, open our ears to you, that we might hear from you today. So do so. We trust you in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated this morning. We are in Esther 4, so we're continuing our series through the book of Esther, and what I'm going to use this morning is Esther 4. That's where we're going to be for the whole time, so you don't need to turn a bunch of pages or do a bunch of things. We're going to stay right here. There's plenty of things that are happening inside of Esther chapter 4. So just remember where we are in this study. We're approaching Esther almost like a movie. Last week we met the enemy of Haman, and he sent out through the king a decree to have all Jews in the Persian Empire executed. And so now here in chapter 4, we're going to see the plan of Mordecai and Esther to figure out, to fix whatever has been caused. How many of you are dessert people? Are you dessert people? You like sweets? Yep. I'm not, just so you know. I know you can tell, but I'm not. I'm really not. For me, I'd rather have seconds of dinner than have dessert. Anybody else like that? You'd rather have seconds of dinner? If I'm being honest, what I really like to have is more French fries. That's what I want. I want more French fries. That's what I want. We were eating at Chick-fil-A this past week, and I got my meal, and I was like, man, I could go for another box of fries now. That's what I like. But a few weeks ago, I think I told you, Meredith and I got to go to this marriage retreat for pastors at Windshape, which is run by Chick-fil-A. And so while we're there, every single meal had dessert after it. You'd eat breakfast, and they give you something sweet after that. You'd have lunch, and you'd get like tiramisu, which I don't like, but you'd have their cake or ice cream, dinner, then you'd have some dessert. And they also had this cafe bakery open the whole time you're there. And so in the middle of the morning, you can go get a coffee and, a pastry or some kind of cookie. There was candy. It was whatever you want. At first, I was like, I don't really need that much. And then I ate all of it. I ate all of it for a week. And I came back home, and I remember being home, and I'd eat lunch, and I'd be like, man, I could really go for something sweet right now. And so I would go get something sweet. In the afternoon, I could really go for like a cookie with my coffee. And so then I would. And then at dinner, gosh, man, I feel like I haven't had anything sweet all day. I could really go for something sweet. And so that went on for a week or two, and I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, I'm not a sweets person. I don't need that to fulfill my day. I don't need that. What happened was that for a week, I was brainwashed into thinking you should have dessert after every meal. That's what happened to me. And so I just lived the rest of my life for 2 weeks thinking that's just how life should be. Then I had this moment of realizing that's not how my life should be. Maybe for some of you it's fine. That does not work for me. I can't do that. Maybe you feel the way after holidays, because from about now until the beginning of January, you eat all the cake and all the pie and all the cookies and all the candy, and then you hit January like, you know what I need? Dessert. I need more dessert. I know I should do a diet, but I think dessert sounds better. And then you have to retrain yourself to not want dessert after every single meal. So today, here's what's going to happen in Esther chapter 4. Esther and Mordecai have spent so much time in the Persian Empire that they've grown accustomed to dessert after every meal. But they're going to come face to face with the fact that that's not best for them. And they're going to have to make some decisions, and the way they're going to decide is really fascinating when we step back to see the story that is unfolding. So let me give us the recap of where we are. The setting is 483 to 473 BC. We're in the great Persian Empire. At this point, it's led by King Xerxes. In our Bibles, you're going to call him Ahasuerus, and he's the king of the empire of Persia. They've conquered many lands. At this point, 50 million people are in the empire, about 44% of the world's population, but they're not done. They want more. And so here's just a picture for us to see how vast this empire is. We learn it's 127 provinces big. It goes all the way from India to Egypt. It's huge. It's massive, this province or this empire of Persia. You see Jerusalem. Jerusalem is really the home base for the Jews. They're now called Jews. They used to be called Hebrews and then Israelites when they got a land called Israel. But now they don't have a land anymore. They're not a people with a place. They're just a people with a faith. And so now they go by Jews, or the Jewish people, based off of Judea or Judah, where they're from. Jerusalem is the capital city where the temple is. Susa is the citadel, so it's the fortress capital of the Persian Empire. It's the winter resort for the king and for the people in Susa. And so what's happened is that we have seen the prosperity and power of the empire. We've seen a number of things happen to promote that, but we've also seen the underbelly of the empire, that they're not as powerful or prosperous as they come across to be. But there are some Jews scattered in the Persian Empire, because the story of the Bible is not the story of Persia, it's the story of God's people, particularly the Old Testament. And so now we've met some of them in Persia. We've met four main characters already. We met King Ahasuerus, that's Xerxes. He's the king of Persia. We've met Mordecai and Esther. Esther and Mordecai are Jewish people in the citadel of Susa, of the Persian Empire, but they don't let people know they're Jewish. In fact, they aren't going by Hebrew or Jewish names, they're going by Persian names. Mordecai is ripped off of the name of a Persian god named Marduk, and Mordecai actually means worshiper of Marduk. Esther is a ripoff of the Persian goddess named Ishtar, which means star. She has a Hebrew name, which we know as to be Hadassah. We learned that earlier in the book. But she has been told by Mordecai, because Mordecai adopted his cousin Esther, because Esther has lost her parents, who were Hebrew, years ago at a young age, and she's been raised by Mordecai. And she's been taught her whole life by Mordecai to not let anybody know that she is Jewish. What's fascinating is that Jews aren't in danger in Persia. In fact, Persia loves the Jews. They tolerate. They love the diversity of religions and faiths. And whenever they conquer a land, they adopt that god into their pantheon of gods. So they're fine. It's fine. And in fact, they were told decades earlier, the Jews that were in the Persian Empire, hey, go back to Jerusalem. You should go back and rebuild your temple. Go back and worship there. So the issue is not danger for them at this point. The issue is whether or not you're going to get what the Persians have to offer if they know you're Jewish. And it all comes to a head. We learned it last week when we met the enemy named Haman. Haman is a descendant of King Agag, who was an Amalekite, which doesn't mean anything to you until I tell you the Amalekites and the Jews are historic enemies of one another. They despise each other. Haman gets promoted to second in command in the Persian Empire underneath King Ahasuerus, and because of his role, when he would enter a room or enter your proximity, you should bow to him. But Mordecai recognizes as a Jew, he's not supposed to bow down to Amalekites. And so the first time, maybe in his life, Mordecai admits that he is Jewish. The word gets to Haman. Because of this long-standing rift generationally between the two of them, Haman goes to the king and gets the king to sign off on this empire-wide execution of the Jews 11 months from when we're going to pick up here. So word has reached everyone. It's gotten out to the provinces now. And that's where we pick up here in Esther chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he learned of this decree, it had gone out. Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. These are signs of mourning, not just for the Jewish people, but for really the Eastern people. It's how you would display your grief or your mourning. And then he goes to the midst of the city, the middle of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. And he went up to the king's gate. This is how you get access to the king. Remember, Mordecai had a seat there. He was some kind of officer at the king's gate. But he went to the entrance. He couldn't go past because no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. Kings don't like sad people. It makes them look bad if you're sad around them. Kings want happy people. So he can't be in the presence of the king. Verse 3, in every province, 127 of them from India to Ethiopia, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews. And they mourned with fasting and weeping and lamenting. And many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. And so widespread around the Persian Empire, pockets of Jews who are now mourning. And there's a bunch of them back in Jerusalem mourning. Verse 4, and when Esther's young women, these are her attendants and her eunuchs, came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. Now, we're going to learn later what they tell her is not the whole story. All she knows right now is that Mordecai is losing his mind in the city, in the city square, in the center of the city. That's all she knows at this point. She knows nothing of the decree that's gone out from her husband, which is a lot like Christmas for a lot of you husbands, because your kids open presents and you're like, oh, I guess we got that for you. I had no idea. You share a house, you share a bank account, and you had no idea what you got your kids for Christmas. Esther had no idea this had gone out. All she knows right now is that her cousin Mordecai, her adopted father, is grieving something. And word gets to her, and she has a plan. She calls for Hatach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai. I'm sorry, let's go back to verse 4, sorry. Her plan was to send new clothes to Mordecai, because new clothes always make you feel better when you're sad. Am I right, ladies? Yep. They make you feel better. So she's like, let me give you some new clothes. You're making a fool of yourself, Mordecai. Take that off. I think she's afraid that's going to trickle up the ladder to her. Like if that gets up to her, now she's going to be perceived in some way. Mordecai, fix yourself. Get over it. Sends him clothes, but he refuses to wear them. Then verse 5. Then Esther called for Hatach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend to her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. So what are you doing, Mordecai? Mordecai responds, Hatach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him. In fact, he gave him the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. That's 10,000 talents of silver, $32 billion. That was Haman's agreement with the king. I'll give you this money if you let me kill all of them. And the king said, I don't need your money. Do with them what you want. Mordecai knows, so he says, and then verse 8, but he's not done. Mordecai also gave Hatach a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther. So Esther, you got to see this. And he wants Hatach to explain to her and command her to go to the king. You're the king's wife. Go to the king and beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of your people. And Hatach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Hatach has to go back to Mordecai. So they're going back and forth. And she said, say this to him, verse 11, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know this, that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, is to be put to death, except to the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I haven't been called to come into the king in 30 days. So Mordecai wants help from Esther. She figures, you're the king's wife. Just go talk to him. He loves you. He likes you. Go talk to him. And Esther says, Mordecai, don't you know how this works? Because here's how she begins the excuse. Everyone knows. All the king's servants and the people of the provinces know that's not how it works here. Like, Mordecai, we've been here our whole lives. Don't you know how this works? You can't just waltz into the king's presence. And she says, even me as the queen, I have to wait for him to extend a scepter to announce me, to invite me into his presence. And then she says, and listen, man, it's been a month since I've seen him, so it's not going to happen anytime soon. But the language here is not that she's surprised. She's just like, that's just, it's how it goes. It's how the king is sometimes. I haven't seen him in a while. I don't plan on seeing him. So, man, I'm sorry, Mordecai. Things are going so bad for you out there, but you know the rules of the empire. I can't just go in and talk to him. So then they went and told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told Hatach to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you'll escape any more than all the other Jews. I think Mordecai's frustrated here. He's like, Esther, I don't know if you're paying attention, but the decree was to kill all Jewish people. And it's only a matter of time until the king finds out you're Jewish too. And he just divorced his wife because she wouldn't come and show off her beauty to his friends. Don't you get it? He doesn't care. You'll be killed too. You're not safe in that palace. You're not safe in the empire. I think you've forgotten that. Then he says, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. A switch has flipped for Mordecai where he was denying his Jewish heritage, and now all of a sudden it's like everything came rushing back to him. The moment where he saw Haman the Agagite refuse to bow, then finally admitted he's a Jew, and now he's reminding Esther, do you remember the promises of God? The promises your parents have taught you, that God's promised a Messiah to come through the Jewish people. He's going to come through the line of King David. And Mordecai is so convinced in the promise of God coming true, he's telling Esther, God's will is going to happen. It's going to happen. But then he says this, if you keep silent, it's going to come from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. It says, Esther, God's will is going to be done either way. It's up to you whether you want to play a part in it, though. But I want you to notice what Mordecai does, because it feels very insulting. He brings up Esther's late father, which feels terribly rude, doesn't it? Like, why bring him up now, Mordecai? Like, why put salt in the wound of your adopted daughter? Why bring this up? Here's what I think Mordecai is doing. I think Mordecai is trying to root Esther in her Jewish heritage. So she brings up her father. Remember, we met him, Abihail, which is a Hebrew name. His name has to do with strength. My father is strength, or my father is mighty. So many scholars think, just some presupposition here, the idea, they believe that her father was killed because he stood up to the Persian Empire. So he's bringing up to her, hey, don't forget where you've come from. And listen, God's going to accomplish what he wants to. But if you don't say anything, it's guaranteed that your line will die. And you will die a Persian. Then he makes this statement. But who knows, Esther? Who knows whether or not you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? One of the more famous lines from Esther, for such a time as this. But I love the fact that it's not a statement, it's a question. I think he's wrestling, he's wondering. He wants her to stop and to think, this might be why you are where you are, Esther. Can you just stop and think about that here for a second? You've been put here for such a time as this. Now, up until now, Esther has only been passive. She's never been an active character in the story. She's always been taken from people, taken places, gone to these places. She's always been passive. We're going to see her become active right here. It's the first time we see it in the story, where she's no longer a passive participant. She's actually an active character. It's about to change here. Verse 15, so Esther told Hatak to reply to Mordecai, which is a moment of suspense. It's one verse. The question is, how is she going to respond? Will she give more excuses? Will she respond with more fear? Like, that's not how it works, Mordecai. Don't you know the king? Or will she come out guns blazing? She just got a halftime talk from her adopted father, and she can't wait. And she's going to storm into the king's presence, and she's going to let him know who she is and how it's all going to go down. Is she going to fight the power of the empire with the power of the kingdom? And her response in verse 16, Mordecai, go gather all the Jews that are found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women, my attendants, will also fast as you do. Then after that, I'll go to the king, though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. And if you're stepping outside of black and white words on a page and thinking through the situation, you got to be like, for real? You want us to stop eating for 3 days. That's your great plan, Esther. The entire Jewish lineage is on the line. And your great plan is for us to not eat or drink for 3 days? That's your plan. We have to get to work, and you're the only one that has access. We can't just twiddle our thumbs and not eat for 3 days. Now, this is the most well-known section of the book of Esther. It's for such a time as this, and then if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die, which sounds like bold, heroic claims from the great heroine Esther in the story. But I'll be honest, if you read this in context, it feels a lot different than that. It feels a lot different. I remember hearing, and there's a lot of women's Bible studies about how to grow up to become bold like Esther and how you want your daughters to be like Esther. Let me just lay this before you. You want your daughter to be like Esther. Esther hid her identity and then used her body to rise the ladder to a place of prominence in the Persian Empire. Is that what you want for your daughter? So let's put all this in context to understand what's happened here, and then we're going to get into why I think that matters for us. So here's the historical recap. 250 years before Esther, the empire of Assyria. I know you feel like, why are we talking about this? It's going to make sense. Assyria conquered the northern kingdom of God's people, which is called Israel, and then it took them into exile, deported them out of Israel into the Assyrian Empire. 125 years later, Babylon conquers Assyria and would conquer the southern kingdom, which is called Judah, and would take those people out of Judah into exile in Babylon. So Assyrian exiles are now property of Babylon, the Babylonian exiles. We learned that Mordecai and Esther's ancestors are part of those people who were taken from Judah to exile in Babylon. 70 so years later, Persia conquers Babylon, which means the Assyrian exiles who were Babylonian exiles are now Persian exiles. But the king of Persia, King Cyrus, hears from the Lord. And God tells Cyrus, send my people back to Jerusalem so they can rebuild the temple. So 50 or so years before the book of Esther, God's people, the Jews, are allowed, they're encouraged to leave Persia, to leave Susa in particular, and to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, to worship God there. Which means Esther and Mordecai's families did not go back to Jerusalem. They stayed in Susa. They stayed here. And why? Because they were getting all the gifts of the empire. They loved the comfort of the empire. Esther and Mordecai could have gone back, but they didn't. We talked about this before. Mordecai's name is after a Persian god. Esther's name is Persian after a Persian god. Mordecai adopted Esther, raised her up as a Persian. But now we find Mordecai and Esther working together to get Esther to be the queen of Persia through this beauty slash sex pageant to become the next great queen of Persia. She ate the king's food. She did whatever pleased him in order to win. What I'm saying is that everything we've read so far, everything the author has told us has led to an understanding that Esther and Mordecai love being Persian. They love it. They've compromised everything, and they actually enjoy it. They now have places of power and prosperity, and they've given their lives over to the empire, and the empire has given all of this back to them. We have yet to read of them doing anything Jewish, doing any kind of prayers or feasts, nothing like that. And the first time we see a hint of Mordecai even embracing his Jewish identity is kind of out of nowhere. He refuses to bow to Haman, and that sets off the chain reaction to now where every Jewish person is under fire. So I'm going to summarize it like this. Here's what it means. If their families would have returned to Jerusalem, none of this would have been happening. If Mordecai and Esther would have returned to Jerusalem, none of this would have been happening. But because they chose to hide their identities and pretend to be something else, they have found themselves here. Mordecai's bold action of not bowing to Haman was actually 50 years too late. And it set all of this in motion. You know what got them here? Was years and years of compromise. Small decisions over time, years and years of buying what the empire is selling. And now the entire Jewish population is in the crosshairs. And that is why Mordecai is in the middle of the city screaming. Yes, he's worried about his people, but also he understands what's happened, what he's caused to happen. Esther and Mordecai had been so swept up by the current of the empire that it took something like this to remind them that that's not who they are. That they might be in the empire, but they are children of the kingdom. You see, for generations, their lives and worldviews had been shaped by the power, prosperity, and politics of the empire, and they drank from that well. They had become the empire. You see it in Esther's response to Mordecai. Mordecai, you know how the empire is, man. I'd love to help you, but it's not what we do around here. You see that they fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And they might have had some kingdom moments from here and there from time to time. But here's what's crazy, is that the empire is okay with kingdom moments. It's fine. Yeah, that fits with us. As long as you don't cause problems, you can do whatever you want. And so they have. They've done whatever they wanted. Because the empire is embracing the kingdom, and it feels like a perfect fit for Esther and Mordecai. And if we're being honest, we can relate, can't we? But now, they come to a crossroads where they have to choose one or the other. They're forced to declare their allegiance. And for Mordecai, it kind of happened emotionally. It just happened out of nowhere. Everything came rushing back about the Amalekites and the Jews and his ancestors and Haman's ancestors, and he was awakened to the fact of who he actually is. And it's changed everything for him, but it hasn't happened yet for Esther, because she's safe in the bubble of the palace of the empire. She has no idea any of this is happening. So even when Mordecai asks for help, she responds not with Hebrew language, but with empire language. I can't do that. And you should know that. Everyone part of the empire knows how it works around here. So all Mordecai has left to do is to remind her of where she's come from and her father's Hebrew Jewish kingdom heritage. And she's awakened to her identity. And it's fascinating that her first response is to call for a fast. I think it's the turning point of the entire story, because I think it's so subversive what she's asking people to do. And here's why. If you've paid attention for 3 chapters, how many times the empire has thrown feasts? Have you noticed that? 6-month feast, a week-long feast. The last feast we read about is called the Feast of Esther. And her response to the feasting of the empire is the fasting of the kingdom. Do you see how subversive that is? How upside down that is? While the empire feasts, the kingdom fasts. And today, this 3-day fast that's celebrated by Jews is called the Fast of Esther. This is a huge moment for her. The empire is displaying her power and prosperity through feasts, but the kingdom displays its power through fasts. What she's calling for is very anti-empire. Here's why I think it matters. It's impossible to feast in the empire while you're fasting in the kingdom. You can't do both of those. You can't both feast and fast. You know what I mean? You got to choose one or the other. And it's remarkable that this great subversive act of fasting is right in the face of the empire's obsession with feasting. So for you and for me, and like Esther, this is the only way for her to stop the barrage of the empire worldview. It's the only way. You remember playing Nintendo when you were growing up? And you'd be playing a game, but your Nintendo was old, and so at some point it would just freeze, and something would come up on the screen, and you had to hit the reset button because it just overheated. That's what this is. This is a reset button. A few weeks ago, I was in my office, and some big stuff had happened kind of worldwide, and I didn't know much about what was going on, and so I was told by a number of people, hey, watch this, listen to this. It'll inform you as far as what's happening. And so I go on YouTube like you do, and I'm watching videos and listening to certain things. Every Tuesday and Wednesday, I get the privilege of picking up my daughter from elementary school. She comes and spends a couple hours with me in my office, and I love it. As long as she wants to do it, I want her to do it. I love her sitting there. But this day, I'm watching and listening, and Landry is sitting in the chair across from my desk, and she has a bag of chips, and it is bugging the mess out of me that she keeps eating chips. driving me crazy. Like, what are we doing? I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. And it hits me. I'm like, why do I feel like this? She's not doing anything wrong. Well, what I was listening to while it was Christian was full of frustration and anger and contention. And it's building in my spirit this, I want to go fight somebody, and I lift my head up and I say, I'm going to fight her. That's who I'm going to fight. That one. That's the one I want to fight. And it just hit me like, Jeremy, what are you doing? This onslaught of emotion and frustration, that's not of the Lord. It's making you take it out on your daughter who just wants to eat a bag of chips because she's hungry because she had lunch at 10 o'clock that day. And what's happening for Esther is that she's calling for a fast because if you don't stop, it will keep coming. If you don't stop, the empire will cascade into you and take you out like you never saw coming. What Esther knew was before she could do anything for the kingdom, she had to get rid of every trace of empire still left in her body. And the same is true for you and for me. And I think it's why we love for such a time as this, and if I die, I die. We love that as just battle cries of the Christian faith. But here's the problem. You can't have a kingdom battle cry while you're feasting on the empire. Can't do it. You can't do both. You have to choose. We have to make some distinction. We have to make room. We have to take a break. We have to Selah. And so what Esther calls for is a fast. So here's my invitation to you today. I want to call us to a fast. I want to invite us to fast because I think here's what's happening. I think we're living in a world right now where we have to choose who we are going to be and where we are going to live, where we're going to plant our flag. And are we planting the flag of the empire or planting the flag of the kingdom? And pastorally, here's what's breaking my heart. I see more and more of us trying to live in the kingdom while we're feasting on the empire. We can't have it both ways. So we use kingdom language for such a time as this. If I die, I die. But we're doing it to expand the empire. And here's where it gets tricky. Because in a country like ours, which I think is the greatest one on the planet, in a country like ours, it's really hard to distinguish between empire and kingdom. In Russia, you'll have no problem. In China, you'll have no problem. In Iran, you'll have no problem. But in a country like ours, it's really difficult to distinguish between the two because the empire is using kingdom language. It gets really hard sometimes. And so I feel a role of mine as your teaching pastor is to help us distinguish between the two. Because we don't have the privilege of it being so overtly obvious to us anymore. We're going to have to do some work to separate the two. Because even for us, our primary life-shaping influences don't come from the church anymore. They come from entertainment, from social media, from celebrities and podcasters and politicians. And so no longer do you come to church as what Paul calls the pillar and buttress of truth. You're coming to church to see if the church lines up with what you already think truth is. And you don't come asking, hey, how should I feel about this? How do I distinguish? What should I feel? You're coming to say, do you agree with me? And if I don't, you get upset. I'm telling you, his word is truth. This is truth. This is it. And not just because it aligns red or blue. It's true because it's true. That's why it's true. Because it's God's word. And when Jesus is praying for the people who would come, he said, I know they're in the world, but they're not of it. And so I want them to have the word of truth. Your word is truth. Fill them with truth. And so it's why I'm only going to teach text. I'm not going to teach you opinion. I'm not going to teach you 5 ways to a healthy marriage. We're going to study the word of God. And so here's where we are today. I think we're being shaped by everything but the church. And because we keep feasting on the empire, we have distorted views of the kingdom and what the kingdom actually looks like. Because we've never actually stopped feasting. Have you ever drank orange juice after you brush your teeth? I think that's what we're doing. I think we're feasting on the empire Monday through Saturday, and that still lingers on our lips while we're eating the bread of life on Sundays. And we're like, ugh, that's gross. Well, maybe what you need is you need some ginger to cleanse your palate first. So then you might actually feast on the bread of life. Because here's what I believe. I believe every day is our for such a time as this moment. There's not a moment in your life that God hasn't sovereignly, providentially ordained for you. Even the ones you think you've messed up, he's working around all of that to get you to where you need to be. See, your workplace, your school, your ball team, your kids' soccer practice, every conversation, every social media post, every interaction you have is for such a time as this. And the way Esther prepared for her such a time as this is through the anti-feast called a fast. But because we don't stop feasting, I think we're taking empire motivation into kingdom mission. And I think we're making a mess of it. So here's what I want us to do pastorally. I want to invite you to fast rather than feast. I want us to think about that thing that we're feasting on that gives us a sense of meaning or purpose or identity. I'm going to give you 3 questions to help you do it. First is this. Here's how you know what that is. What do you keep bringing up in conversations? What do you keep talking about? What do you hope the other person asks you about? What is that thing that you have to bring up in small group? What is that thing, secondly, that you go to sleep and wake up thinking about? The last thing on your mind and the first thing on your mind. It's probably that thing that you're feasting on. It's the lingering effects. And let me give you a third one. What is your social media algorithm putting in front of you all day long? You know how that works. You get what you want when it comes to social media. The videos you linger on, the things you click on, it reads that and then spits it back out to you in succession, 100-fold. And so what happens is you're like, oh my gosh, this is everywhere. No, it's not. It's everywhere on your phone. That's where it is. And so we begin seeing the world through the algorithm instead of seeing the world through the world. And so it builds an identity, it builds a mission, it builds a purpose in your life. Pastor and author who has a great commentary on Esther, Mike Cosper, says that we are creatures looking for meaning and purpose. And these pursuits can quickly become pseudo-religions that offer some sense of meaning or a hint of longed-for transcendence. I know you don't think about that as a religion, but it is. We are practicing a religion based on whatever we're going for identity and purpose and mission. It's religious. It creates a set of practices in our lives to get us there. So where do you find meaning and purpose? What has become your pseudo-religion? College football? Well, easy for you to say, your team stinks. That's fine. I'll own that and say it's easy not to watch right now. Totally fine. But it's a religion, isn't it? You make sure you're home at a certain time with a certain group of people to do a certain thing. You orient your life around that. You think about it. You read books about it. You study it. You wear clothes about it. Maybe it's not college football for you. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's Taylor Swift. Maybe it's Eminem. Maybe there's some music that you devote your calendar and your life to. Maybe it's the sport you play. Maybe it's your school or your education or social media or your job. But if I can be honest about where I've seen it a lot lately in our people, I think a lot of us find meaning and purpose in politics. And it's not even a presidential election year. I think we're finding identity. We're so desperate for meaning and purpose that we grasp at anything that offers a hint of it. And we're feasting on it. And it's all we think about, and it's all we talk about. It's all we want to bring up in small group and over dinner. It's all we Google. It's all we search for on YouTube. And I'm telling you, it's empire, not kingdom. That's empire. And I know it's confusing because I know in our country those lines can be blurred. I don't want them to be blurred anymore. I want you to know that's empire language. If it riles you up to yell at your 9-year-old for eating chips, that's empire, not kingdom. If it makes you see people differently and to judge them, that's empire, and that is not kingdom. But we're feasting on it, and it will never give you what your soul so desperately needs. And you know that, but every few years, we're right back to that well. Well, that was because that one was bad. Well, until I get a new one. That'll make me feel better. How's that going? Are you feel more at peace? Are you more content? Are you a better husband and wife? Are you a better mom or dad? I believe that we need to fast from it, some of us. I think for some of us it means getting off of social media. And I know you think I hate social media. I do hate social media. Because for me, social media feeds all the dark parts of my soul. I can't do it. And I think some of us are in the same place. And I just don't want to continue living your life there. So I know it's crazy to think about you not being on social media. Maybe some of you can handle it, and God bless you. I know I can't. But it's designed to have you feast on empire. And it's distorting your view of people and your view of the church. It's distorting your view of the Lord. For some of you, it might mean fasting from YouTube and podcasts and the news. Whoa, well, how will I know what's going on in the world? Well, what's going on in the world is making you mad. We aren't wired to have that kind of information at our disposal. Our human minds can't handle it. And we get overwhelmed, and we get anxious, and we get angry and frustrated. What if you took 3 days and didn't watch the news? 3 days and didn't read Apple News on your phone? What if you did that? Oh, I can't do that. Yeah, you can. Yeah. Because you sound a lot like Esther. Oh, that's not how the empire works, man. It's not how it works around here. But what if the information is killing your soul? What if it's killing your witness in your relationships? Do one more thing, then you can send all the emails this week. But I'm going to start. Have you noticed how many times in Esther we've heard about the king's presence, being in the presence of the king? Even this chapter alone. We've seen that Mordecai can't go in the king's presence because he's sad, and Esther can't go in the king's presence even though she's his wife because he hasn't invited her in yet. We've got a king's gate where you have to be interviewed in order to get into his presence. We've got a whole team of advisors who won't let you get into the presence of the king. And here's what's crazy is that Mordecai and Esther have accepted that as normal. They're like, I haven't seen him in 30 days. That's how it goes. That's how marriage is sometimes. No, it's not. That's not normal. It's not normal that while you're grieving and mourning, the king doesn't want you in his presence. That's not normal. This is how distorted it's gotten for Esther and for Mordecai. And because they've adopted the empire, here's what they've forgotten. You have unfiltered access to the king of the kingdom. While the king of the empire requires you to be happy, and requires you to make an appointment, the king of the kingdom says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. I've torn the veil. You can approach the throne of grace with confidence. But the empire has distorted them. And so here's what's beautiful about a 3-day fast is that it's 72 hours of prayer. 72 hours with the king of the kingdom. You think that would change somebody? You think that would bring clarity to the situation? Esther can go right to the throne. And here's what I want to tell you today. You can too. The empire is lying to you. That king doesn't care anything about you. You want to know how I know? You need an appointment to be with him, and his wife hasn't seen him in 30 days. But the king of the kingdom came to you. He left heaven and came to earth to make a way that we might approach him in boldness. So I don't know where you are running to feel some kind of mission or purpose. But today you're going to have it for such a time as this moment. And you're going to want to say, man, if I die, I die. I'm doing it. I would encourage you to fast first. Let's make sure you're not using kingdom language for an empire mission. Let's make sure, because here's the difference. The empire wants to give you power. The kingdom wants you to walk in weakness. Esther's not going to the king in power. In 3 days, she'll stand before the king, not having eaten in 3 days. That's not power. That's weakness and vulnerability. Some would call it the way of the cross. In those 3 days, she will lay aside all of her desires and wants, and her body will be retrained to feast on the bread of life, and it will change the course of human history as we know it. Not because she was powerful, but because she was powerless until she went to the Lord. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I don't know where you find yourself today. Maybe you feel powerless. And so any chance to seize the day feels like mission and purpose. You don't approach the throne of the King of the Kingdom in power. We approach the throne of the King of the Kingdom in weakness. We bow before him. Some of us crawling to get there. Some of us just scraping by to get there. If you remember David's psalm, he desires a broken and a contrite heart. So I'm going to ask you to be courageous and just ask the Lord, do I need to fast from something this week? What do you need me to give up? Because maybe you're feeling it, right? Maybe you're feeling the tension, you're feeling the frustration, you're feeling the weight of the empire. Man, what if you just didn't? What if we just didn't feast on it anymore? And maybe it's in a relationship you're in. You're trying to find that satisfaction through empire living like Esther. Can I tell you where that lands you? It lands you 30 days of not seeing your husband. Maybe it's work, maybe it's family, where you're trying to use empire means to accomplish a kingdom mission. You can't do it that way. God creates Adam and Eve. He gives Eve to Adam, and he says, this is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. And then he makes this statement, for this reason, the husband will leave his mother and father and will cling to his wife. I'm going to use that language here today. Some of us have to leave the empire to cleave to the kingdom. Otherwise, you're bringing all that with you. And a 3-day fast is exactly what Esther needed to clear her head, to get all the empire out, that she might have a kingdom mission for such a time as this. And I believe we all have one today. I just believe we do. Maybe today you've been so desperate to get in the presence of the King of the Empire that you're willing to do whatever it takes. I want you to know the King of the Kingdom's already done whatever it takes for you. And you can go to him right now in your time of need. You can ask him for grace and for mercy and forgiveness and salvation. You can ask him for help and for wisdom. God, would you make us today a kingdom kind of people? A people who choose a fast over a feast. A people who can walk right into the presence of the King of the Kingdom. And God, would you give some of us today even courage to assess where we are? Maybe what we need to hear is God's going to do what he wants to do. But if you don't step up, it's going to cost you your family. Maybe that's what we need to trigger a response. To remind us who we are. That before our identity is anything in the empire, we are children of the King of the Kingdom. So grow us up as sons and daughters of the Most High King, that we would approach our, for such a time as this, moments with a kingdom heart and see the kingdom come from heaven to earth. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.